Hi, Guy. Tonight we journey back to ancient Persia, not to the clamor of battlefields, but to a tranquil scene. A hanging garden at sunset, birdsong echoing around you. You probably won't survive the impending doom about to befall this paradise, but hey, at least the view's nice while it lasts. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 636 AD. You stand on a terrace of the legendary Hanging Gardens, albeit a slightly less pristine version. Turns out, keeping exotic flora alive in the desert requires a frankly disturbing amount of crocodile dung used, shall we say, horticulturally. The air, thick with the scent of jasmine and, well, let's just call it earthiness, hangs heavy around you. Imagine terraces cascading down, bursting with vibrant blooms. Crimson bougainvillea draped over balustrades, fragrant frangipani releasing their perfume into the twilight, date palms swaying gently in the warm breeze. Water trickles down elaborate irrigation systems, a constant, soothing murmur against the backdrop of the setting sun. The sun, a molten orb of orange and gold, dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fiery reds and deep purples. It's a breathtaking spectacle, a testament to human ingenuity and the enduring power of nature. Historians still argue about the exact location of these fabled gardens. Some place them in Babylon, others in Nineveh. Wherever they truly were, tonight, we're here, experiencing their ephemeral beauty. Exotic birds call from hidden perches. Rose-ringed parakeets flash their emerald wings as they flit between the flowering vines, their chattering calls echoing through the still air. Vibrant Indian peafowls strut amongst the foliage, their iridescent tails shimmering in the fading light, occasionally letting out a piercing shriek that cuts through the tranquil atmosphere. And then there's the occasional grumpy-looking griffin vulture, perched high on a date palm, surveying the scene with a disdainful glare, as if judging your horticultural choices. Mainstream historical fact: birds were a common motif in Persian art, symbolizing freedom, power, and even divine messages. Their presence here, in this man-made paradise, adds another layer of richness to the already vibrant tapestry of the gardens. Quirky tidbit: some scholars believe the gardens weren't just gardens at all, but actually multi-story aviaries, designed to house a vast collection of exotic birds from across the known world. Imagine that, a symphony of 1,000 different bird calls filling the air, a living, breathing aviary that would have been a wonder to behold. Tonight, however, a different kind of whisper drifts through the perfumed air, a subtle unease that prickles at the edges of your awareness. You are a court astrologer, renowned throughout the land for your ability to read the stars, to decipher the celestial whispers that speak of the future. Your fingers, stained with the inks of ancient charts and calculations, trace the familiar patterns in the darkening sky. The constellations, usually so comforting in their predictable dance, tonight, tell a story of their own. They murmur of change, of upheaval, of a coming storm from the west. A storm that carries with it the thunder of hooves and the clash of steel. The stars, in their cold, distant wisdom, speak of the Muslim invasion of Persia, a tidal wave of change that will sweep across the land, reshaping its destiny forever. Mainstream historical fact: the Muslim conquest of Persia began in the 7th century, marking a turning point in the region's history and the beginning of the Islamic Golden Age. This invasion, fueled by religious fervor and the desire for expansion, would irrevocably alter the political and cultural landscape of Persia. You sigh, the weight of this foreknowledge settling heavily on your shoulders. The beauty of the gardens, the fragrance of the flowers, the calls of the birds, all seem tinged with a melancholic awareness of their fleeting nature. Perhaps that grumpy-looking griffin vulture was an omen after all. Its presence, a silent harbinger of the coming darkness. The air grows cooler as the last vestiges of sunlight fade from the sky, the stars becoming ever more prominent, their whispers growing louder. The future, once a distant murmur, now feels palpably close, its shadow stretching across the paradise of the Hanging Gardens. You close your eyes, taking a deep breath of the perfumed air, committing this moment to memory. The scent of jasmine, the coolness of the water, the distant calls of the birds, a fleeting moment of tranquility before the storm. The fate of Persia, the fate of these magnificent gardens, hangs in the balance. And you, the court astrologer, can only watch as the stars unfold their predetermined narrative. You glance toward the Shah's chambers. Inside, Yazdegerd III, the last Sasanian king, slumbers restlessly. His dreams, usually filled with visions of banquets overflowing with roasted peacock and thrilling polo matches where his team always miraculously snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, are tonight clouded with a thick, cloying unease. Quirky tidbit: Sasanian kings were avid polo players, a fact sometimes depicted in their rock reliefs, frozen in time, mallets raised in perpetual triumph. You smile wryly. Little does he know, those pampered polo ponies will soon be trading mallets for scimitars, the manicured fields of play for blood-soaked battlegrounds. The swift, graceful dance of the game will become a desperate, chaotic scramble for survival. A single lamp flickers beside his bed, casting long, skeletal shadows that dance across the rich tapestries and silken cushions, mimicking the worries whispered incessantly by his advisors. Whispers that slither through the palace like venomous snakes, coiling around the Shah's fragile peace. Mainstream historical fact: Yazdegerd faced internal dissent as well as external threats. A kingdom fractured, squabbling amongst themselves like children over a dropped sweetmeat, while the ravenous wolves circle ever closer, their hunger a palpable thing. The whispers tell of rebellious nobles, of dwindling coffers, and, most ominously, of the relentless, inexorable advance of the Arab armies, their banners a dark stain spreading across the eastern horizon. You trace a pattern in the stardust that has settled upon the cool marble of the terrace railing, an echo of the celestial map unfolding above. The constellations, ancient and immutable, seem to mock the fleeting concerns of mortals. Historians still debate whether the Sasanians had a formal system of astrology, poring over fragmented texts and cryptic inscriptions, searching for definitive proof. But you, my friend, have made a very comfortable living by pretending they did. By weaving elaborate narratives of planetary alignments and celestial influences. By whispering predictions of good fortune and ill omen into the ears of the wealthy and powerful. So let's just keep that between us, shall we? After all, a little mystique never hurt anyone, especially when it comes lined with gold. The truth is, the stars tell no tales, at least not in the way I claim. But the anxieties they reflect in the eyes of men, those are a story all their own. The night air, thick with the intoxicating scent of jasmine and honeysuckle, carries the distant murmur of city life. The raucous laughter of merchants haggling over prices, pushing and shoving in the crowded marketplace. The mournful howls of stray dogs barking at shadows, real and imagined. And the faint rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, each blow shaping metal and destiny in the flickering light of his forge. You know that blacksmith. A good man, Baraz by name, with hands as rough as granite and a heart as soft as the dates he presses upon you during your visits, though perhaps a little too fond of goat cheese. The aroma clings to him like a second skin, a pungent aura that precedes his entrance by several paces. He claims to be descended from a jinn, a mischievous fire spirit who once danced in the heart of a volcano. He tells tales of his ancestors' exploits, of hidden treasures and forgotten magic, his eyes gleaming with an almost unsettling intensity. You haven't ruled out the possibility yet. There's a strangeness to him, a flicker of something other that you can't quite place. Perhaps it's just the goat cheese. Tonight, the city's usual vibrant hum is tinged with an underlying tension, a subtle discord in the familiar melody. Even from this distance, you can sense the fear that has begun to seep into the very stones of Ctesiphon. Fear of the unknown, of the whispers that have become shouts, of the impending storm that threatens to shatter the gilded cage of their complacency. The Shah sleeps, oblivious to the gathering darkness. He dreams of victories long past, of a world that is already slipping through his fingers like sand. He clings to the fading embers of a glorious past, while the future, a ravenous beast, waits patiently in the shadows. And you, perched on the edge of this precarious present, can only watch and wait, the stars your silent confidants, the scent of jasmine, a bittersweet reminder of the fragile beauty that is about to be consumed. The blacksmith's hammer rings out in the night, a mournful clang, a final, desperate plea against the inevitable dawn. I adjust my elaborate turban, heavy with jewels. A gift from a grateful merchant who swore I predicted the birth of his unusually profitable camel. The weight of it is familiar, comforting even, like a hand on my brow. It's a reminder of the trust people place in me. In the whispers of the stars I interpret. The stars don't lie, I remind myself. They just have complicated relationships with the truth. Like a lover's quarrel whispered on the wind, understood only by those who know the language of the heavens. Kind of like my cousin, who claims to be able to talk to pigeons. I suspect it's mostly bribery with breadcrumbs. He swears the birds tell him secrets, whispers of courtly intrigues and lost trinkets. I've yet to see him divine anything more significant than the location of the baker's discarded scraps. Still, there's a certain charm to his delusion, a reflection of the human need to believe in something beyond the mundane. A light breeze rustles the leaves of a nearby date palm, the sound like 1,000 silken whispers. The air, usually thick with the sweetness of ripening fruit, carries a different scent now, the faint metallic tang of blood on the wind. It's a subtle shift, easily missed by those not attuned to the nuances of the desert, but to me it's as stark as a crimson stain on a white silk robe. It confirms the whispers I've been hearing in the celestial dance, the ominous alignment of Mars and Jupiter, the darkening of the moon. Historians still argue about the exact timeline of the early battles, poring over dusty scrolls and fragmented accounts, but one thing is certain. The sands of Persia will soon be stained crimson. The whispers are growing louder, the drums of war beating a steady rhythm in the distance. The Shah sleeps peacefully on his silken cushions, his chest rising and falling with the slow, steady rhythm of slumber. He looks younger in his sleep, the lines of worry etched around his eyes and mouth softened, almost erased. He's a good man, our Shah, a just ruler who cares deeply for his people, perhaps too deeply. It is this kindness, this gentle nature, that makes the coming darkness all the more terrifying. He trusts easily, believes in the inherent goodness of men. He is not prepared for the treachery that lurks in the shadows, the ambition that burns in the hearts of his enemies. Do I wake him? Do I shatter the fragile peace of his slumber with the chilling prophecy of war, the vision of blood-soaked sands and burning cities? Do I burden him with the weight of a future he is powerless to prevent? The weight of my turban presses down on me, a physical manifestation of the burden I carry. The jewels, once symbols of gratitude and respect, now feel like burning embers against my skin. Do I share the coming doom? The vision of armies clashing, of empires crumbling, of the very fabric of our world unraveling? It is a heavy truth, a bitter draught to swallow. To speak it aloud is to unleash it, to give it form and substance in the world. To silence it, however, is to betray the trust placed in me, to become complicit in the unfolding tragedy. Or do I, like that particularly insightful pigeon my cousin keeps bribing, offer him gentler prophecies? Perhaps something involving a successful harvest and a particularly bountiful supply of figs? A vision of prosperity and peace, a soothing balm to ease his worries? It would be a lie, of course, a gilded cage built on a foundation of deceit. But it would also be a kindness, a small mercy in the face of inevitable suffering. My fingers trace the intricate patterns woven into my turban, each loop and knot a testament to the complexities of fate. The stars themselves offer no easy answers, only glimpses of possibility, whispers of what might be. It is up to us, the interpreters of their silent language, to decipher their meaning, to choose which threads to follow, which paths to illuminate. The metallic scent on the wind strengthens, a chilling reminder of the encroaching darkness. Time is running out. The Shah stirs in his sleep, a low murmur escaping his lips. He is dreaming, perhaps of peaceful fields and bountiful harvests. I look up at the night sky, searching for an answer in the cold, distant stars. They offer no solace, no easy escape from the dilemma that confronts me. Only the unwavering truth, etched in the celestial dance. The storm is coming, and I, the humble astrologer, must choose whether to be the harbinger of its fury or the weaver of a comforting, albeit temporary, illusion. My hand rests on the small pouch at my side, filled with herbs and powders, the tools of my trade. Among them is a small vial of poppy milk, a potent soporific. A few drops in his wine, and his sleep would deepen, his dreams become even more vivid, more pleasant. He would awaken refreshed, unaware of the darkness gathering at the edges of his kingdom. He would have a few more hours, perhaps even a few more days, of blissful ignorance. Is ignorance truly bliss? Or is it a dangerous luxury, a fragile shield that shatters at the first touch of reality? The weight of the turban feels heavier than ever, the jewels digging into my skin. The wind whispers through the date palms, carrying with it the scent of blood and the distant rumble of thunder. The stars offer no guidance, only the cold, hard truth. I close my eyes, taking a deep breath of the night air. The decision, like the weight of the future, rests solely on my shoulders. I trudged back to my observation platform, a cluttered space filled with astrolabes, charts, and the occasional half-eaten pomegranate. The sticky juice on my fingers seemed to mirror the stickiness of the situation unfolding in the heavens above. I squinted at the constellation of the Lion, currently doing a rather awkward tango with the Scorpion. Their celestial dance was less a graceful waltz and more a drunken stumble, their usual fiery brilliance dimmed, flickering like dying embers. It wasn't a good sign. In fact, it was the kind of sign that suggested my career as a royal astrologer was about to go the way of that pomegranate, slightly messy, and definitely over too soon. If the Shah didn't like the news from the battlefield, he certainly wouldn't appreciate confirmation from the stars themselves. The stars tell a story, not in words, but in patterns, whispers, the slow dance of celestial bodies across the night. Some scholars, I've heard, believe the Persians see the sky as a giant tent, embroidered with stars like glittering decorations. A beautiful notion, but tonight, the decorations were askew, the threads frayed and tangled. The tapestry of the night sky, usually so predictable, so comforting in its ancient rhythms, was unraveling. Tonight, the patterns were chaotic, a celestial jumble of foreboding. There's war, yes, the clash of Mars and Jupiter screaming that much loud and clear. But there's also something else. A ripple, an echo, a suggestion of change more profound than mere conquest. A tremor in the fabric of the cosmos, barely perceptible, yet resonating with a power that made my teeth ache. I've seen this pattern before, in the eyes of dying men, clutching at life with one hand while reaching for the unknown with the other. I've seen it in the smoke rising from funeral pyres, twisting and turning, carrying whispered secrets to the heavens. It's a pattern etched, not in stars, but in the very essence of existence. It is the pattern of transformation. Not destruction, not simply an ending, but a fundamental shift, a metamorphosis, the kind that leaves you breathless, questioning everything you thought you knew. The air up here was thin, the wind biting cold against my skin, but I felt a strange heat building within me, a premonition humming beneath my ribs. The Lion and the Scorpion continued their clumsy dance, oblivious to the deeper currents flowing through the cosmic sea. I traced their movements on my chart, the familiar lines now blurred with uncertainty. The established order, the predictable dance of power, was about to be disrupted. The world, as we knew it, was poised on the precipice of change. Down below, in the bustling city, life continued as normal. Merchants haggled in the marketplace. Children chased pigeons in the square. Lovers whispered secrets beneath the shadows of the date palms. They were unaware of the celestial drama unfolding above them, the cosmic gears grinding towards a momentous shift. They were unaware of the whispers in the wind, the secrets held within the starlight. They were unaware of the coming storm. I, however, could not afford such blissful ignorance. My duty, my curse, was to read the signs, to interpret the celestial whispers for the Shah, whether he wanted to hear them or not. And what I saw tonight filled me with a dread so profound it felt like ice water trickling down my spine. This wasn't just a war, it was a crucible. Persia would be tested, broken, and reshaped. The invasion, brutal as it would undoubtedly be, was only the catalyst. The true transformation would come from within. From the ashes of the old, a new Persia would rise. Historians, centuries from now, will debate the cultural impact of this invasion, pore over scrolls and tablets, argue over the minutiae of cause and effect. They'll dissect treaties and battle strategies, analyze the rise and fall of empires, but they'll miss, the subtle shifts, the undercurrents of change that ripple through time. They'll see the destruction, the bloodshed, the loss. They'll see the conquerors and the conquered, the victors and the vanquished, but they won't see the deeper metamorphosis, the slow, agonizing rebirth. They'll write about the political and economic consequences, the shifting borders and alliances. They'll chronicle the rise of new dynasties and the fall of old gods. They'll talk about the impact as if it were a single, definable event, a neat and tidy historical footnote. But you, my friend, peering into the abyss of the coming centuries, know one thing for sure. Persia, like the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, albeit a slightly singed butterfly, will emerge from these ashes different. The old ways will be challenged, discarded, or perhaps subtly woven into the fabric of the new. The flames of war will forge a new identity, a new spirit. The very soul of Persia will be tempered in the fires of this conflict. The exact nature of this transformation remains shrouded in the mists of time, hidden within the chaotic dance of the stars. But one thing is certain. The Persia that emerges from this crucible will not be the Persia that entered it. And as the first rays of dawn begin to paint the eastern sky, I can't help but wonder if I'll even recognize the world that awaits us on the other side. The pomegranate, now nothing but a sticky stain on my robe, seems a fitting metaphor for the fading remnants of a world on the brink of irrevocable change. The stars have spoken, and their message is clear. The dance is just beginning. Inside the Shah's chambers, Yazdegerd stirred. He sat up, heart pounding like a war drum against his ribs. The elaborate armor he still wore, a magnificent piece crafted with scales of gold and inlaid with turquoise, felt constricting, a cage around his chest. He glanced around the dimly lit room, the flickering flames of the oil lamps casting dancing shadows on the richly woven tapestries that adorned the walls. Beside his bed sat a golden goblet filled with wine, untouched. Tonight, even the finest vintage of Shiraz, its aroma usually so enticing, could not soothe the disquiet in his soul. The sweet, heady scent reached him, a ghostly reminder of lighter times, of feasts and celebrations, a stark contrast to the bitter taste of anxiety that now clung to his palate. He remembered the hushed whispers of his advisers in the divan, their faces creased with worry, their warnings of growing dissent among his nobles, men whose loyalty he had believed unshakable, now whispering of rebellion in shadowed corners. He remembered, too, the reports from the eastern marches, the growing strength of the Arab tribes beyond the desert, a relentless tide-gathering force, threatening to break upon the borders of his empire. He felt the weight of his crown, an intricate gold circlet heavy with jewels, rubies the color of blood, emeralds the color of spring, diamonds that captured and refracted the flickering lamplight, and tonight, heavier still with the burden of a dying empire. Each gem, once a symbol of his power and glory, now felt like a tiny, sharp stone pressing into his flesh, a constant reminder of the immense responsibility he carried, a responsibility he felt increasingly unable to bear. He threw back the silken covers of his bed. The crimson fabric shimmers in the lamplight, embroidered with images of griffons and lions, symbols of royal power, emblems of the might of the Sasanian dynasty, now strangely mocking in the face of the crumbling reality around him. The griffins, with their eagle heads and lion bodies, creatures of myth and legend, seemed to stare back at him with accusing eyes. The lions, majestic and proud, seemed to roar a silent lament for the fading glory of his ancestors. He stood, legs unsteady beneath him, the weight of his armor, a physical manifestation of the weight on his soul. He walked to the terrace, the polished marble cool beneath his bare feet. The heavy doors, inlaid with ivory and silver, creaked open, admitting the sounds of the night. The night air was cool against his skin, a welcome contrast to the stifling heat of the chamber, but the chill in his soul was deeper, an icy grip that tightened around his heart. He stared out at the gardens below, a meticulously planned expanse of fountains and flowering trees, usually a source of peace and tranquility. Tonight, however, he saw only the ghosts of his ancestors, their faces etched in the patterns of the stars, their voices murmuring in the gentle night wind, their warnings echoing through the rustling leaves. Khosrow I, the Anushirvan, the just, whose reign had been a golden age of prosperity and expansion, seemed to gaze upon him with a mixture of sorrow and disappointment. Shapur II, the warrior king, who had crushed Roman legions and expanded the empire to its greatest extent, seemed to scoff at his perceived weakness. He could almost hear their voices, a chorus of whispers carried on the wind. "Hold fast to the traditions," one voice urged. "Do not yield to the barbarians," another commanded. "Remember the glory of our ancestors," a third pleaded. But the voices were conflicting, confusing, a cacophony of advice that offered no clear path forward. He closed his eyes, trying to shut out the spectral whispers, trying to find some semblance of peace within himself. But the turmoil in his heart raged on, mirroring the turmoil within his empire. The empire his forefathers had built, brick by brick, victory by victory, now teetered on the precipice of collapse, threatened from within by dissent, and from without by the rising tide of a new power. He felt trapped, caught in a web of circumstance, a web spun from the threads of history, tradition, and the relentless march of time. He had inherited an empire at the zenith of its power, and now, it seemed, he was destined to preside over its decline. He opened his eyes once more, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, where the first faint streaks of dawn were beginning to paint the sky with hues of gray and rose. The new day was coming, a day that promised more challenges, more difficult decisions, more burdens to bear. He reached up and touched the crown upon his head, the cold metal, a chilling reminder of his responsibilities. The weight of it seemed to press down on him, crushing him beneath its immense burden. He wondered, for the 1,000th time, if he was worthy of the legacy he had inherited, if he possessed the strength and wisdom to navigate the treacherous waters that lay ahead. He wondered if he could save his empire, or if he was destined to be the last Shahanshah, the final ruler of a dynasty that had spanned centuries. Historians still debate the exact reasons for the fall of the Sasanian Empire, pointing to various factors: internal strife, economic instability, the relentless pressure from the Byzantine Empire in the west, and the explosive rise of the Islamic Caliphate in the east. They analyze the military strategies, the political machinations, the economic policies, searching for the key to understanding the empire's demise. But you, standing silently on the terrace above, the cool night air swirling around you, witness the raw human element of the story. You see the weariness etched on Yazdegerd's face, the despair in his eyes, the weight of the crown pressing down upon him. You understand that sometimes, amidst the complex tapestry of historical events, amidst the grand sweep of empires and the clash of civilizations, the fate of nations can rest on the shoulders of a single individual, burdened by responsibilities beyond his capacity to bear. You know that sometimes the weight of a crown is simply too heavy. From my vantage point high above the palace gardens, the world spread out beneath me like a tapestry woven with moonlight and shadow. The scent of jasmine and roses, usually so intoxicating, tonight felt heavy, oppressive. The city of Ctesiphon, jewel of the Sasanian Empire, shimmered under a canopy of stars, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. I watched, a silent sentinel, as a figure emerged from the inky blackness clinging to the base of the palace walls. He moved with a fluid grace, a desert fox slipping through the night, his dark robes blending seamlessly with the shadows. The desert night was his ally, offering cool respite from the brutal sun that baked the land by day. Messengers often traveled under the cloak of darkness, their movements swift and unseen, their messages carried with the urgency of the wind. He carried a scroll, sealed with the unmistakable royal insignia, a stylized image of a winged lion, its golden claws outstretched as if to grasp the very heavens. I recognized the messenger instantly. Darius. A wiry man with eyes that missed nothing and a smile that promised secrets. Known throughout the court for his speed and discretion, he was a phantom, appearing and disappearing with the whisper of a rumor. And he had an uncanny ability to win at dice, an ability that had filled my own pockets on more than one occasion. I suspected loaded dice, of course, but proof remained elusive. He moved across the terrace towards Yazdegerd, his footsteps so light they barely disturbed the stillness of the stone. Yazdegerd, the Shahanshah, King of Kings, stood with his back to me, gazing out at the city spread before him. He seemed lost in thought, his shoulders slumped as if bearing the weight of the world. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, a premonition of the coming storm. As Darius approached, Yazdegerd turned sharply, his hand instinctively reaching for the jeweled dagger at his hip. The glint of gold and precious stones caught the moonlight, a fleeting reminder of the opulence and power that was about to be tested. Daggers were ubiquitous in Sasanian Persia, a symbol of status and a constant companion, even for royalty. They were as much a part of the attire as the elaborate silks and richly embroidered robes. Darius bowed low, his head almost touching the polished stone, and presented the scroll. Yazdegerd snatched it from his outstretched hand, his movements abrupt, almost violent. He broke the royal seal, the crisp snap echoing in the stillness of the night, and unfurled the parchment. The moonlight illuminated the elegant script, words that held the fate of an empire. As he read, the blood drained from his face, leaving it ashen and drawn. His features hardened, his jaw clenched, his expression becoming as unyielding as clay baked in the desert sun. The scroll confirmed what his advisors had feared most. The Arab armies, driven by the fervor of a new faith, a monotheistic creed whispering of one God, of destiny, of a purifying fire, had crossed the Euphrates. Their numbers were far greater than anticipated, a tide of warriors sweeping across the ancient lands, threatening to engulf everything in their path. I watched, helpless, as Yazdegerd crumpled the scroll in his fist, the parchment crackling in protest. He turned his back on the gardens, on the city bathed in moonlight, on the silent, watchful stars. He turned his back on paradise. The scent of jasmine and roses, now cloyingly sweet, seemed to mock the bitter reality unfolding before me. In that moment, the future felt as fragile as the crumpled parchment in the king's hand. Historians, poring over fragmented texts and whispered legends, still debate the wisdom of Yazdegerd's next move. Did he underestimate the zeal of the Arab invaders? Did he cling too tightly to the old ways, the ancient gods, failing to grasp the transformative power of this new faith that swept across the land like a wildfire? Did he hesitate when decisive action was needed, paralyzed by the enormity of the threat? These questions echo through the corridors of time, unanswered, unresolved. But one thing remains undeniable, a stark and tragic truth etched in the annals of history. On that night, under the silent gaze of the stars, paradise was lost. The Sasanian Empire, a civilization that had flourished for centuries, stood on the precipice of collapse, its glory about to be swallowed by the sands of time. The world, as I knew it, was about to change forever. The whispers of one God, of destiny, of fire, were about to become a roar that would reshape the very fabric of the ancient world. Down in the palace courtyard, the air crackles with the scent of fear, sharp and metallic, like blood on steel. The Sasanians, after all, were masters of the forge, their steel renowned throughout the known world. Their swords, honed to razor sharpness, gleamed even in the fading light, held by soldiers rushing to and fro. The rhythmic clinking of their armor, a dissonant symphony of steel against steel, echoed through the courtyard like wind chimes in a gathering storm. Their faces, hardened by years of training and discipline, were now etched with a raw, primal fear, tempered only by a grim, unwavering determination. These were the cataphracts, the backbone of the Sasanian army, the heavily armored cavalry that had sent empires crumbling. Tonight, however, even their legendary courage seemed strained, their movements tinged with a desperate urgency. Servants, their faces pale and drawn, scurried through the chaos, whispering in hushed tones, their words snatched away by the wind. Their hands trembled as they packed treasures, jeweled goblets, intricate carvings, silken robes, into heavy wooden chests, their eyes darting nervously towards the darkening sky, as if expecting some divine retribution. In the royal kitchens, usually alive with the bustling energy of cooks and the tantalizing aromas of elaborate feasts, the fires burned low, casting long, flickering shadows across the soot-stained walls. The familiar, comforting smells of roasted lamb, spiced wine, and freshly baked bread were conspicuously absent, replaced by the acrid tang of burnt offerings hastily prepared for the gods. I grimaced, the bitter smoke stinging my eyes and catching in my throat. Burnt offerings were never a good sign. They spoke of desperation, a last-ditch attempt to appease fickle deities. And in this case, the desperation was palpable, especially considering the sacrificial offering. My cousin's prized racing camel, Baraz, disguised with a rather unconvincing, hastily assembled wig made of straw and wildflowers. The poor beast, normally a picture of sleek muscular grace, now looked utterly ridiculous and frankly quite terrified. I sighed, shaking my head. I'd specifically told my cousin Parviz not to bring Baraz to the palace. He'd assured me, with a mischievous glint in his eye, that the camel would be perfectly safe. Safe, apparently, from everything but a misguided attempt at divine intervention. I made a mental note to never trust Parviz with important livestock again. Or, perhaps, anything more valuable than a chipped clay pot. The heavy, oppressive atmosphere in the kitchens mirrored the growing unease that permeated the entire palace. It was a tangible thing, a weight pressing down on everyone's chests, constricting their breath. Even the flickering candle flames seemed to shrink from it, their light struggling to penetrate the encroaching darkness. Outside, the sky, once a vibrant tapestry of twilight hues, had now become a bruised, inky canvas, devoid of stars. Historians, in their dusty scrolls and endless debates, still argue over the extent of religious practices within the palace walls. Some claim the Sasanians were devout Zoroastrians, their lives governed by the cosmic struggle between good and evil. Others whisper of secret cults, of hidden rituals and forgotten gods. Whatever the truth, one thing was undeniable. Tonight, even the gods seemed distant, absent, as if they, too, were holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable. I had seen this pattern in the stars before, in the slow, deliberate movements of the celestial bodies, a cosmic dance foretelling the changing tides of fortune, the slow, inevitable eclipse of one age by another. It was a pattern that never boded well, and tonight the pattern was clearer, more ominous than ever before. The air thrummed with a strange, unsettling energy, a silent prelude to the storm that was surely coming. The scent of fear, sharp and metallic, was no longer just the smell of blood on steel. It was the scent of an empire on the brink of collapse, the scent of an era drawing to a close, the scent of the end. I leaned against a cold stone pillar, my gaze fixed on the pathetically disguised camel. Poor Baraz! He deserved better than to be a pawn in this desperate game of divine appeasement. He deserved to be galloping across the open plains, the wind whipping through his coarse fur, his powerful legs carrying him towards the distant horizon. Just like the Empire, he deserved a better fate. A sudden commotion from the courtyard snapped me out of my reverie. The clanging of armor intensified, punctuated by shouts and the heavy thud of running feet. The whispering of the servants escalated into a panicked murmur, their movements becoming more frantic. The sense of impending doom that had been hanging in the air all evening suddenly solidified, crystallizing into a sharp, piercing fear that stabbed through me like a Sasanian blade. Something was happening. Something terrible. And whatever it was coming fast. Yazdegerd, his face pale but resolute, emerged from his chambers, clad in full battle armor. The gold and steel gleamed in the torchlight, catching the intricate designs etched into the metal, swirling depictions of mythical creatures locked in eternal combat, heroes wrestling monstrous beasts, and gods raining fire from the heavens. The armor, a masterpiece of Sasanian craftsmanship, usually a symbol of imperial might, tonight seemed more like a shroud, the weight of a dying empire pressing down upon his shoulders. The fire in his eyes, reflected in the polished metal, burned not with rage, but with a cold, desperate determination, the kind born from the knowledge that all hope rests on the edge of a sword. His voice, sharp and clear, cut through the hushed tension of the courtyard. "To the eastern gate! Reinforce the defenses! Archers to the towers!" His commands, crisp and precise, echoed off the stone walls, each word a hammer blow against the growing fear. Messengers, their horses snorting and stamping, were dispatched, carrying urgent pleas for aid to distant allies. Seals were broken, ancient pacts invoked. Promises of gold and land were whispered in darkened halls, the currency of desperation. From the plains beyond the city walls came the rumble of movement, the creak of wagons, the clatter of hooves, the murmur of thousands of men preparing for war. The rhythm of war drums began, a slow, steady pulse that beat like a heart against the silence of the night, a heartbeat that grew stronger, more insistent, with each passing moment. From your observation platform, high above the bustling city, you watched the dance of preparation unfold below. Torches flared like angry stars, casting long, distorted shadows that stretched across the meticulously manicured royal gardens. Familiar paths, once havens of tranquility, were transformed into something menacing. The intricate mosaics, depicting scenes of idyllic pastoral life, were now obscured by the flickering shadows, their vibrant colors muted, their serene beauty lost in the encroaching darkness. The air, usually filled with the sweet perfume of jasmine and roses, now carried a metallic tang, the scent of fear clinging to the back of your throat. The birds, usually so vocal at this hour, their songs, a familiar lullaby, were silent. Even they, it seemed, recognized the gravity of the coming dawn, the impending clash of civilizations. You traced a pattern in the stardust that had settled on the smooth, cool stone of your railing, an image of a falcon diving towards its prey, wings tucked tight, a predator locked onto its target, an image of inevitable descent. The falcon, a symbol of Persian royalty, now seemed like an omen, a harbinger of the empire's fall. The silence of the birds, the scent of fear, the frantic movement below, all whispered of the coming storm. The wind shifted, carrying with it the distant echo of the drums, a rhythmic reminder of the inevitable. You closed your eyes, trying to block out the sights and sounds of the city preparing for war, but the image of the falcon remained, etched in your mind's eye. You had witnessed the might of the Sasanian Empire at its zenith, the splendor of its court, the ingenuity of its people. You had walked through its bustling markets, listened to the tales of its poets, and marveled at the wisdom of its scholars. Now you stood on the precipice of its demise, watching as the empire marshaled its last defenses, a dying giant bracing for a final desperate blow. Historians, in the centuries that followed, would argue endlessly about the effectiveness of Sasanian military tactics against the swift, relentless advance of the Arab armies. They would dissect the strategies, analyze the weaponry, and debate the turning points. They would pore over ancient texts, searching for clues, trying to understand how an empire that had stood for centuries could crumble so quickly. They would offer theories and counter-theories, each scholar convinced of their own interpretation of events. But you, my friend, watching the dance of torches below, the frantic preparations for war, the palpable fear that hung heavy in the air, you knew one thing for sure. Tonight, the scent of jasmine, that sweet, intoxicating fragrance that had always permeated the air of the royal gardens, was overpowered by the metallic tang of fear. A fear that spoke not of individual battles lost or won, but of something far greater, something more profound, the fear of an ending, the fear of the unknown, the fear of the silence that would descend after the last drumbeat faded away, the fear of an empire's last breath. You watched, your heart heavy, as the city, once a beacon of light and learning, transformed into a fortress, a cage preparing for the onslaught of the inevitable. The drums beat on, their rhythm echoing the approaching doom, a mournful dirge for a dying empire. Months bleed into a year. My boots echo on the cracked paving stones, the only sound in this ghost city. Ctesiphon, the jewel of the Sasanian Empire. Now, just an empty shell. Dust swirls in the vacant marketplaces, where merchants once hawked silks and spices. The air, once thick with the intoxicating aroma of incense and roasting meats, now chokes me with the stench of decay. Smoke still curls from some of the ravaged buildings, a lingering testament to the fires that swept through the city. I remember the stories. The bustling streets, the vibrant life that pulsed through Ctesiphon. I'd heard tales of the hanging gardens, a paradise within the city walls. Now, I trudge through the skeletal remains. Withered vines cling to crumbling terraces. The fountains, once a marvel of engineering, are dry, their intricate mechanisms choked with dust and debris. Some scholars believe they were powered by a complex system of water wheels and pumps, a testament to the ingenuity of the Sasanians. I kick a loose cobblestone down a deserted street. It clatters across the cracked pavement, a hollow sound that echoes the emptiness in my soul. Even the most sophisticated plumbing, I think grimly, cannot withstand the ravages of war. The palace looms before me, a vast, silent monument to a vanished empire. The great gates, once guarded by elite soldiers, are flung open, offering no resistance. I step through, into the deserted courtyard. The silence is almost oppressive, broken only by the whisper of the wind as it stirs the dust devils that dance across the cracked marble. The throne room is a cavernous space, the grandeur still evident despite the decay. Moonlight streams through broken windows, casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. Dust motes dance in the silver beams, illuminating the abandoned throne. It's a magnificent thing, wrought of gold and ivory, intricately carved with scenes of mythical beasts and heroic battles. Now it's just a golden skeleton gleaming against the shadows. Empty. The Sasanians gone, swept away by the tide of conquest. Historians will argue for centuries about the exact circumstances of Yazdegerd's flight. Did he flee in the dead of night, disguised as a commoner? Did he make a last stand, defiant to the end? Or was he simply swallowed by the chaos? No one knows for sure. All that remains is the silence, the emptiness. The ghost of a king vanished like smoke in the wind. I sink onto the steps of the throne, the cold stone seeping through my worn trousers. My legs ache, but the weariness in my heart is heavier. I stare at the empty space where Yazdegerd should be sitting, the rightful ruler of this land. What was it like, I wonder, to watch your kingdom crumble around you? To see your people scattered, your cities burning? To know that everything you held dear was slipping away, like sand through your fingers? A harsh croak breaks the silence. I look up. A raven perches on a broken column, its black feathers ruffled by the wind. It stares down at me with intelligent, knowing eyes. A scavenger picking through the remains of a fallen empire. A grim reminder that sometimes even gods abandon their posts. The weight of it all presses down on me. The silence, the emptiness, the ghosts of the past. Ctesiphon, once a vibrant hub of life, now a desolate tomb. The hanging gardens, once a paradise, now a withered husk. The throne, once a symbol of power, now a hollow reminder of what has been lost. And Yazdegerd, the last king, vanished without a trace. I close my eyes, breathing in the dust-laden air. What now? What hope remains when even kings are swept away by the tides of fate? The raven croaks again, a harsh, mocking sound that echoes the emptiness in my soul. The throne remains empty. The kingdom lies in ruins. And I am left to wander the ghost city, a solitary witness to the end of an era. The sand, fine and relentless, sifted into my sandals with every step, grinding between my toes like tiny malevolent teeth. Eastward I trudged, following the whispers on the wind, the rumors of Yazdegerd's flight. A phantom king fleeing a shattered kingdom. The desert stretched before me, an ocean of ochre and gold, vast and unforgiving. The sun, a merciless god in the bleached blue sky, beat down with relentless fury. I cursed the crocodile dung sunscreen I'd so enthusiastically applied back in the garden, convinced of its efficacy by some long-forgotten scroll. It now seemed less a shield against the sun's wrath and more an irresistible attractant for every fly within a 5-mile radius. My face, I imagined, resembled a particularly unpleasant fruit, buzzing with unwelcome attention. Days blurred into weeks, each sunrise a mocking reminder of the distance still to cover, each sunset a lament for another day lost in this desolate expanse. Deserted villages became a recurring motif in the monotonous landscape. Empty husks of once thriving communities, their wells dry, their fields scorched and cracked, their homes abandoned, ghostly reminders of the empire's fading glory. The irrigation systems, once marvels of engineering, now lay in ruins, choked by sand and neglect. The bustling marketplaces, once vibrant with the hum of commerce, were now silent, save for the whisper of the wind through crumbling archways. These were the scars of war, the physical manifestations of a shattered empire. The once fertile fields, now barren and lifeless, spoke volumes about the disrupted agriculture and trade routes, confirming the historical accounts I'd studied. The few people I encountered were shadows of their former selves. Their faces were etched with fear, their eyes darting nervously towards the horizon as if expecting an imminent attack. They offered little more than wary glances and hurried whispers, their words laced with anxiety. Tales of Arab raiders, of forced conversions, of a new faith spreading like wildfire across the land. These were the narratives that filled the void left by the empire's collapse. They spoke of a new God, Allah, and of his prophet Muhammad, whose teachings were sweeping across the land, challenging the old ways, reshaping the very fabric of their world. I listened, my heart heavy with the weight of their fear, and squinted at the horizon, shimmering in the heat, wondering what the future held. Historians still debate the extent of local resistance to the Arab advance, but I'd encountered a suspicious number of particularly grumpy-looking sheepdogs, with miniature bows and arrows strapped to their shaggy fur. Whether this constituted organized resistance was debatable, but it certainly spoke to a general atmosphere of discontent. My water skin, once plump and reassuring, was now almost empty, its leather folds clinging to each other like parched lips. My sandals, once sturdy and reliable, were worn thin, the soles flapping loosely with each step, exposing my blistered feet to the scorching sand. My hope, like the last rays of sunset fading over the dunes, was dwindling fast. The initial surge of determination that had propelled me eastward was slowly eroding, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. Doubt, like the desert wind, whispered insidious suggestions, questioning the wisdom of my journey, the possibility of my success. I thought of the Shah, Yazdegerd III, a king without a crown, an emperor without an empire. I pictured him somewhere out there, in this vast wilderness, his future, like the desert itself, stretching before him, vast, uncertain, and utterly unforgiving. I wondered if he felt the same despair that was slowly consuming me, the same sense of loss, the same crushing weight of responsibility for a kingdom he could no longer protect. Was he too haunted by the ghosts of his former glory, the memory of a life that was now irretrievably lost? The wind picked up, swirling the sand around me in a dizzying dance. I pulled my tattered cloak tighter around my shoulders, a meager shield against the encroaching chill of the desert night. The stars, brilliant and sharp in the clear night sky, offered no solace, only a stark reminder of my insignificance in the face of this vast, indifferent universe. I stumbled onward, driven by a fading ember of hope, a stubborn refusal to surrender to despair. Somewhere out there, in the heart of this desolate landscape, lay the answers I sought, the key to understanding the fate of an empire, the destiny of a king. And I, a solitary traveler in a sea of sand, was determined to find them. The wind, hot and dry, whipped through the deserted streets of Merv, carrying with it the fine sand that stung my eyes and grated against my teeth. This once bustling oasis city, a jewel on the Silk Road, was now a ghost of its former self. The marketplace, which I remembered teeming with merchants hawking silks from the east, spices from the south, and exotic birds from lands unknown, was eerily silent. Dust devils danced where throngs of people had once bartered and haggled. The scent of roasted lamb and sweet dates, once so pervasive, was replaced by the metallic tang of blood, faint but lingering. The tea-houses, usually filled with a murmur of gossip, the rhythmic clinking of dice, and the soothing strum of lutes, stood empty, their doors ajar, inviting only the wind and the encroaching desert. I remembered sitting in one such tea-house with Yazdegerd, listening to him debate philosophy with visiting scholars, his voice resonant and confident. Now, only silence echoed within those once vibrant walls. I walked towards the polo grounds, drawn by a morbid curiosity. Here I had watched Yazdegerd, astride his magnificent warhorse, display his impressive mallet skills, his laughter ringing out as he scored yet another point. The grounds were now deserted, the manicured grass withered and brown, the mallets lay scattered and broken, like the bones of forgotten heroes. The goalposts were toppled, symbolic of a kingdom crumbling, a dynasty falling. The scene struck me with a profound sense of loss, a poignant reminder of what had been, and what was now irrevocably gone. Finally, I found shelter in a deserted caravanserai, its once grand entrance now scarred and chipped. The courtyard, which would have been bustling with camel trains and merchants unloading their wares, was littered with broken pottery, discarded rugs, and abandoned goods, remnants of lives interrupted, journeys abandoned. The air hung heavy with the smell of stale water and decay. In a dimly lit corner of the caravanserai, I found a small group of refugees huddled together, their faces etched with weariness and despair. They were the remnants of a defeated army, broken soldiers and fleeing civilians, clinging to life by a thread. I shared my meager rations with them, dried dates and a handful of almonds, a paltry offering in the face of such overwhelming loss. They accepted the food with quiet gratitude, their eyes hollow and haunted. In hushed whispers, they spoke of the Battle of Nahavand, the decisive blow that had shattered Sasanian resistance. They spoke of the overwhelming Arab forces, their disciplined ranks, their unwavering faith. They spoke of the Sasanian army, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, fighting bravely but ultimately in vain. They spoke of the Shah, Yazdegerd, his desperate attempts to rally his troops, his final futile stand. Historians I knew would debate the exact numbers, the precise strategies, the contributing factors for years to come. But here, in the hushed whispers of the defeated, the truth was stark and simple. It wasn't a polo match anymore. This was the end of an era, the twilight of an empire. As night fell, I sat alone in the courtyard of the caravanserai, staring up at the vast expanse of the night sky. The stars, usually a source of wonder and comfort, seemed cold and indifferent, distant witnesses to the unfolding tragedy. The desert wind continued its mournful lament, swirling dust around me like the ghosts of fallen soldiers. I reached down and traced a familiar pattern in the dust, a falcon falling, its wings broken, its descent inevitable. It was a symbol Yazdegerd had often used in his poetry, a metaphor for the fleeting nature of glory, the fragility of power. I thought of the Shah, his crown lost, his kingdom broken, his future, like that fallen falcon, plummeting towards an unknown and unforgiving earth. Where would he go? What would become of him? These questions, like the desert wind, whispered unanswered in the desolate night. The weight of his defeat, the weight of Persia's defeat, settled heavy on my chest, a suffocating blanket of despair. The world I knew, the world I had grown up in, was crumbling around me, and I, a lone observer, could do nothing but watch as it fell, piece by piece, into the dust of history. The silence of the night was broken only by the whisper of the wind, a constant reminder of the emptiness that surrounded me, the emptiness that had become my new reality. The village clung to the foothills of the Hindu Kush like a stubborn weed in a rock crevice. Small, almost invisible against the towering peaks, it offered a measure of concealment I desperately craved. My journey from the fallen city had been long and brutal, a testament to the resilience of both the human spirit and the human body, mostly the body's stubborn refusal to give up, despite the spirit's fervent wish that it would. I arrived in the village with nothing but the clothes on my back, a gnawing emptiness in my stomach, and the lingering scent of smoke clinging to my hair. I found the miller easily enough. Every village has a miller. He was a kind-faced man, etched with the lines of hard labor and harder times, his hands calloused and thick from years of coaxing flour from unwilling grains. He listened patiently as I stumbled through my tale, the words catching in my throat, the memories a bitter taste on my tongue. I told him of the siege, of the Shah's desperate defiance, of the final, crushing defeat. I spoke of lost hope and shattered dreams, of a kingdom reduced to ashes and dust. He didn't interrupt, just nodded occasionally, his eyes reflecting the flickering light of the oil lamp that hung precariously from a rafter. When I finished, the silence stretched, broken only by the rhythmic chirping of crickets outside. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the entire Hindu Kush, he offered me shelter in his humble home, and a bowl of lentil stew. It wasn't ambrosia, not even close, but it was warm, and it filled the aching void in my belly. I accepted gratefully. I wasn't picky anymore. Ambrosia was a memory from another lifetime. We fell into a routine. By day I helped the miller with his work, hauling sacks of grain, sweeping the dusty floor of the mill, anything to earn my keep and distract myself from the gnawing memories. By night, we sat by the fire, sharing stories. His were simple tales of village life, births and deaths, harvests and hardships, the quiet rhythm of existence in a world untouched by the ravages of war. They were a balm to my wounded spirit, a reminder that life, in some form, continued. One night, as the embers glowed and the shadows danced on the walls, the miller spoke of a dream. "I dreamt of a falcon," he said, his voice low and hushed, "a great bird soaring above the mountains." He paused, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the firelight. Its wings were not broken, as one might expect after such a fall. They were transformed, shimmering with a strange, new kind of strength. He looked at me, his gaze searching. "I believe it is an omen," he whispered, "a whisper of hope in this darkness." I knew that such dreams and prophecies were common in these remote villages. Historians, in their dry, academic way, still debated their origins and interpretations, attributing them to everything from folk superstition to cleverly disguised political maneuvering. But I, who had spent countless nights deciphering cryptic star charts, poring over ancient scrolls filled with arcane symbols, I recognized a desperate need for good news when I heard it. Hope, however fragile, was a precious commodity in these dark times, a flickering candle in the overwhelming darkness. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The miller's dream echoed in my mind, the image of the transformed falcon seared into my thoughts. I stepped outside, into the cool night air. The sky was a vast, inky canvas sprinkled with a million diamonds. The stars, usually a source of endless fascination and study, tonight offered a different kind of solace. Their distant silence was strangely comforting, a reminder of the vastness of the universe, the insignificance of human strife in the grand cosmic scheme. I knelt on the ground, tracing patterns in the dust with my finger. The familiar constellations, the paths of celestial bodies I had memorized by heart, seemed meaningless now. Instead, I drew a new pattern, a falcon rising, its wings not broken but remade, stronger, more resilient. Its ascent was slow, hesitant, but steady. It was an image of hope, of rebirth, of the possibility of a new beginning. I thought of the Shah, his crown lost, his kingdom shattered, his pride broken. But perhaps, just perhaps, his spirit unbroken. Perhaps, like the falcon in the miller's dream, he too could find a new kind of strength, a new purpose in the ashes of defeat. Perhaps the dream wasn't just a whisper of hope for the miller, for the village, but for all of us who had lost everything in the flames of war. Perhaps, just perhaps, it was a whisper of hope for the future. The miller's wife, a stout woman with flour dusting her apron, pointed to the small, neglected patch behind the mill. "Weeds, mostly," she'd sighed, thrusting a rusty trowel into my hands. "And a few stubborn herbs. My husband's back. Well, he can't manage it anymore." The pay was meager, a few coins and a loaf of bread each week. But it was work. It was a place to be, a way to fill the hollowness in my days. The soil was dry, packed hard as stone. The well, barely more than a muddy puddle, yielded only a trickle of precious water. Yet, as I toiled under the relentless sun, I found a strange comfort in the rhythm of the work. The feel of the earth beneath my fingernails, the satisfying crunch of weeds being pulled from the earth, the slow, patient unfolding of life from seed to sprout, it grounded me in a way nothing else had since the invasion. I coaxed life from that stubborn earth. Parsley and mint sprang up, where only weeds had grown before. I planted onions and carrots, their feathery green tops a vibrant contrast against the dusty ground. I even managed to coax a few stubborn wildflowers, bright splashes of purple and yellow, to bloom near the crumbling stone wall. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A small patch of order in a world turned upside down. One afternoon, as I was weeding around a struggling patch of thyme, a shadow fell across the garden. I looked up to see an old woman standing by the gate, her face etched with the wisdom of countless seasons. She wore a simple tunic, the color of the desert sand, and her eyes were as deep and knowing as the wells that dotted the oasis. She was the miller's mother, I learned later, the keeper of the garden, before her son's back had given way. She watched me work for a long time, her gaze steady and unwavering. Finally she spoke, her voice as dry and rustling as the autumn leaves. "You have a gardener's hands," she said, her words a quiet observation, not a compliment. "You understand the patience of the earth." I straightened, wiping the sweat from my brow. "It's just a small garden," I mumbled, feeling strangely self-conscious under her scrutiny. She smiled, a network of wrinkles crinkling around her eyes. "Even the smallest seed holds the promise of a mighty tree." "Change," she continued, her voice taking on a faraway quality, "is not an ending but a transformation." She pointed to a withered grape arbor near the edge of the garden, its vines stripped bare by the winter frost. "Look," she said, her voice soft yet firm. "The vine appears dead, lifeless. But look closer." I followed her gaze and saw, pushing through the dry earth at the base of the vine, tiny green shoots, fragile yet determined. "New life," she whispered, rising from what seemed lost. "A promise of future harvests." Grapes. I remembered the vineyards that had stretched across the hillsides before the invasion, the sweet scent of ripening fruit hanging heavy in the air. The invaders had burned the vines, hacked them down in their fury, leaving behind a desolate landscape. "Persia," the old woman continued, her voice resonating with a quiet strength, "is like the vine. It has endured many winters. Its roots run deep in the earth, its branches reach towards a new kind of sun." Her word struck a chord within me. I had seen the destruction, the devastation wrought by the invaders. I had felt the despair, the sense of utter loss. But looking at the tiny green shoots, pushing through the hard earth, I began to see a glimmer of hope, a possibility of renewal. We spent the rest of the afternoon together, the old woman sharing her knowledge of the earth, of herbs and flowers, of the rhythms of the seasons. She spoke of the Persian gardens of old, renowned for their beauty and variety, their intricate designs and fragrant blossoms. She described roses the color of sunrise, jasmine that perfumed the night air, and fountains that played like silver music in the sun. She spoke of the resilience of nature, its ability to heal and regenerate, to adapt and thrive even in the harshest conditions. And as I listened, I began to understand that even the most devastating storms can fertilize the soil. They can clear away the deadwood, make space for new growth, create opportunities for change. Historians I know still argue about the long-term effects of the invasion. They debate the political ramifications, the economic consequences, the cultural shifts. But I, weeding the miller's small patch of earth, my hands stained with soil, my back aching from the sun, began to understand something they could not glean from their scrolls and parchments. I understood the power of resilience, the quiet strength of the earth, the enduring spirit of Persia, embodied in the tiny green shoots pushing through the dry, cracked soil. And in that understanding I found a seed of hope, a fragile promise of my own rebirth. The camel's rhythmic gait, a slow, swaying pendulum, became the rhythm of my days. Eastward we journeyed, a ribbon of humanity and beasts threading its way across the tapestry of the desert. The mountains, our destination, remained a hazy blue promise on the horizon. Days bled into one another, marked only by the sun's relentless climb and fiery descent. The air, scorching by day, turned biting cold with the setting sun, the sand radiating the day's captured heat long into the night. The terrain was unforgiving, vast stretches of rock and sand, punctuated by the occasional oasis offering fleeting respite. Our caravan was a microcosm of the empire itself, a motley collection of souls drawn together by the shared purpose of reaching the east. There were merchants with their wares, silk from China, spices from India, carpets from Persia, their faces etched with the weariness of long journeys. There were pilgrims, their eyes fixed on the spiritual horizon, their steps fueled by unwavering faith. And there were refugees, their faces bearing the scars of loss, their stories whispered in hushed tones, tales of villages razed, families scattered, lives irrevocably altered. Around the crackling campfires each night, under a sky dusted with a million stars, we shared stories. Stories of hardship and survival, of love and loss, of dreams shattered and rebuilt. A lute player, his instrument worn smooth with age and countless journeys, became the heart of our nightly gatherings. His fingers danced across the strings, weaving melodies that spoke of ancient heroes, of empires that had risen and fallen like the tides, of the enduring spirit of Persia that had weathered countless storms. His songs, though often tinged with the melancholic strains of a world in upheaval, carried a thread of hope, a quiet strength that echoed through the desert night, resonating deep within us. One evening, huddled close to the fire against the encroaching chill, a merchant from Samarkand, his face weathered like an old parchment, began to speak. He spoke of a rumor, a strange whisper traveling on the wind, a tale almost too fantastical to believe. He spoke of Yazdegerd, the fallen king, not dead as many believed, but alive, hidden in a remote mountain fortress, rallying his remaining forces, planning a counter-offensive, a desperate bid to reclaim his throne. The merchant himself scoffed at the tale, dismissing it as the fanciful imaginings of desperate men clinging to faded hope. Yet, as he spoke, his eyes, reflecting the firelight, held a flicker of something else, something almost defiant. A spark, perhaps, of that same enduring spirit the lute players sang of. It reminded me of the miller's dream, the image of the falcon, its wings broken and bloodied, yet somehow, miraculously, remade, soaring once more against the storm. The merchant's tale sparked heated debate among the travelers. Some dismissed it outright, citing the overwhelming evidence of Yazdegerd's defeat. Others, their voices hushed with awe and a touch of fear, clung to the possibility, however slim, that their king still lived, that hope was not entirely extinguished. After all, hadn't history shown them time and again that empires could crumble and be rebuilt, that fortunes could reverse in the blink of an eye, that the whispers of hope, however faint, could ignite into a roaring flame? I listened, my heart a battleground of doubt and belief. Could it be true? Could Yazdegerd have escaped the clutches of fate? The rational part of me, steeped in the cold reality of the situation, found it hard to believe. Yet something else stirred within me, a flicker of hope, kindled by the merchant's words, fueled by the lute player's melodies, by the shared stories of resilience whispered around the campfire. The desert night, vast and silent, seemed to hold its breath, listening with us. The stars, ancient witnesses to countless human dramas, twinkled with an enigmatic light. They had seen empires rise and fall, kings crowned and dethroned, hopes kindled and extinguished. They had seen it all, and they offered no answers, only their silent, watchful presence. As I looked into the faces of my fellow travelers etched by the firelight, I saw reflections of myself, of our shared humanity, our shared vulnerability, our shared capacity for hope. We were all, in our own ways, refugees of a sort, displaced by the tides of war and fate, seeking a safe harbor in a world turned upside down. We were all carrying our own burdens, our own tales of loss and resilience, our own secret hopes and fears. Historians, poring over scrolls and chronicles in the quiet solitude of their libraries, may debate the authenticity of such tales, sifting through facts and legends, trying to separate truth from fiction. But we, huddled around the campfire beneath a sky filled with ancient whispers, knew one thing for sure. In the heart of every story, no matter how fantastical, no matter how improbable, there's a seed of hope. And it is that seed, nurtured by the shared human spirit, that allows us to endure, to rebuild, to rise again, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It is that seed that keeps the flame of hope flickering in the darkest of nights, a testament to the enduring resilience of the human spirit. And as the lute player's melody drifted through the desert night, a melody tinged with both sorrow and hope, we knew, with a certainty that transcended logic and reason, that even in the face of defeat, the story was not yet over. The song of the caravan, the song of resilience, continued. The path wound ever upwards, clinging to the mountainside like a stubborn vine. Each step was a victory against gravity, a slow ascent towards the clouds. Finally, perched on a narrow ledge overlooking a breathtaking valley, I found it, a village so small it seemed to have grown organically from the rock itself. Houses of gray stone huddled together, their roofs thick with moss, smoke curling lazily from chimneys. The air was thin and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke. Here, nestled amongst the peaks, time seemed to flow differently, governed by the rhythm of the seasons and the whisper of the wind. I learned later that these mountain folk held fast to ancient traditions, their customs as ingrained as the lines etched into the weathered faces of the elders. I needed work, shelter, a purpose. A kind woman, her face etched with the wisdom of the mountains, offered me both. She was a weaver, renowned throughout the village for her skill. Blind from birth, her fingers danced across the loom with an astonishing speed and precision, guided by an inner vision I couldn't comprehend. Her small cottage was filled with the comforting clatter of the loom, the rhythmic beat a counterpoint to the wind's song. Skeins of yarn in every color imaginable hung from the rafters, a vibrant rainbow against the rough-hewn stone walls. She spun tales as she worked, her voice soft and melodic, stories of the mountain spirits, ancient prophecies, and the intricate patterns of fate. I watched her, fascinated, as her fingers flew, transforming simple threads into intricate designs. Silk and wool intertwined, a delicate dance of color and texture. Each pattern held a meaning, a story whispered by the wind, mirrored in the stars wheeling across the night sky. "Fate," she said one evening, her blind eyes seeming to look directly into my soul, "is not a single thread, but a tapestry woven with countless choices." She paused, the click of the shuttle the only sound in the room. "Each decision is a knot, each loss a broken strand, each act of resilience, a new color in the pattern." Her words resonated deep within me. Until then, fate had seemed a fixed and immutable path, a predetermined course I was powerless to alter. But watching her create such beauty from seemingly random threads, I began to question that assumption. Could it be that we had more agency than I believed? Could we in some way shape our own destinies? Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I learned to card wool, to spin thread, to recognize the subtle nuances of dye derived from mountain herbs and berries. The weaver's wisdom seeped into me, not through lectures or pronouncements, but through the quiet rhythm of the loom, the stories she shared, and the intricate dance of her fingers across the threads. One day she called me to her side. She placed a piece of unfinished cloth in my hands. The pattern was complex, filled with symbols I didn't understand, a language whispered in thread and color. "Complete it," she said, her voice firm. "Weave your own story into the threads of fate." I stared at the cloth, my fingers tracing the intricate knots. The unfinished pattern felt like a mirror reflecting my own uncertain future. The threads, like the choices before me, seemed to stretch out in a dizzying array of possibilities. I hesitated, overwhelmed by the task. What story did I want to tell? What path did I want to choose? I thought of the scholars and philosophers, their endless debates about fate and free will. Historians still argued about the degree of free will allowed by fate, but here, in this simple mountain cottage, fingers tracing the weaver's knots, I began to understand. Perhaps, just perhaps, we have more control over the pattern than we realize. Taking a deep breath, I picked up a needle and thread. The silk was cool against my skin, the color a deep, vibrant blue, the shade of a twilight sky. It reminded me of the nights I had spent on the road, looking up at the vast expanse of stars, wondering what my future held. The needle felt clumsy in my hand at first, my stitches uneven and hesitant. But as I continued, my movements grew smoother, more confident. I thought of the Shah, his crown lost, his kingdom broken. Yet even in his downfall, his choices, like the threads in my hand, remained his own. He had woven his own story, however tragic, into the grand tapestry of fate. I didn't know what my pattern would look like, what colors would dominate, what knots would bind it together, but in that moment, as my fingers moved across the cloth, I felt a sense of purpose, a flicker of hope. I was no longer simply a wanderer, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. I was a weaver, crafting my own destiny, one thread, one knot, one choice at a time. The weaver's words echoed in my mind. Each decision is a knot, each loss a broken strand, each act of resilience a new color in the pattern. And as I wove, I began to understand the profound truth hidden within those simple words. The pattern was not predetermined, but fluid, ever-changing. And I, with every stitch, was adding my own unique thread to the intricate tapestry of fate. The path wound upwards, a ribbon of dust and rock snaking through the heart of the mountains. I climbed, each breath a labor in the thinning air, the wind a sharp whisper against my skin. Solitude was my goal, an escape from the clamor of the world below, a search for answers in the silence of the peaks. The mountains, I knew, held a sacred significance for countless generations. Places where the earth touched the heavens, where the whispers of the gods could be heard in the rustling of the wind. The terrain was unforgiving, a testament to the raw power of nature, a challenge to both body and spirit. Yet, I pressed on, drawn by an unseen force, a yearning for something I couldn't quite name. Finally, nestled within a hidden valley, cradled by the towering peaks, I saw it, a monastery, its walls the color of the surrounding rock, almost indistinguishable from the mountain itself. It was a place of refuge, a sanctuary from the world's relentless march. As I approached, the heavy wooden doors creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. Monks, their faces etched with the wisdom of ages, weathered like the ancient stones that surrounded them, greeted me with quiet nods. They offered me shelter, a simple room with a straw mat and a rough woolen blanket, and a bowl of warm barley gruel, a staple that had nourished countless souls before me. When they spoke, their voices were low and resonant, echoing through the valley as if the very mountains themselves were speaking, their words carrying the weight of centuries. The days that followed fell into a rhythm of quiet contemplation, punctuated by the monks' chants and the ceaseless murmur of the wind. I spent my time wandering the monastery's grounds, meditating in the small, incense-filled temple, and observing the monks as they went about their daily tasks. They moved with a quiet grace, a sense of purpose that transcended the mundane. Their world was one of simplicity, a stark contrast to the complexities of the world I had left behind. Here, in the heart of the mountains, time seemed to slow its relentless march, allowing for introspection, for a deeper understanding of the self and the world around it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the jagged peaks, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, I found myself sitting with the eldest monk. He was a man of few words, his eyes holding the wisdom of countless generations, his presence emanating a profound sense of peace. We sat in silence for a long time, listening to the wind whisper through the valley, watching the shadows lengthen across the ancient stones. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and resonant, echoing through the valley like the voices of the past. "Persia," he said, his gaze fixed on the towering peaks that framed the valley, "is not defined by its kings or its conquests, but by its spirit, by its resilience, by its ability to transform itself, like these mountains themselves, enduring through the ages." He gestured towards the peaks, their jagged silhouettes etched against the twilight sky. "Change," he continued, "is not an ending, but a reshaping, a constant dance between creation and destruction. The mountains understand this. They have seen empires rise and fall, witnessed the ebb and flow of civilizations. They remain steadfast, enduring, constantly reshaping themselves in response to the forces of nature." He paused, his eyes twinkling in the fading light. "The Persians," he added, "like the mountains from which their rivers flow, their life springs, understand this too." His words resonated deep within me, echoing the whispers of the wind, the timeless wisdom of the mountains. I knew that some scholars believed the Persians saw mountains as the very source of their lifeblood, the origin of their rivers, the guardians of their land. It made sense here in the heart of these majestic peaks to feel that same connection, that same sense of reverence. I thought about the history of Persia, its long and tumultuous journey through the ages. It was a story of constant change, of empires rising and falling, of conquests and defeats, of cultural exchange and transformation. Yet, through it all, Persia had endured, its spirit unbroken, its identity forged in the crucible of change. The mountains, I realized, were a metaphor for this enduring spirit, a symbol of Persia's resilience, its ability to adapt and transform itself in the face of adversity. Staring at the mountain's ancient and enduring form, silhouetted against the darkening sky, I began to understand. Historians may debate the impact of geography on Persian culture, the interplay between the land and its people, but here, in the heart of the mountains, the answer seemed clear. True strength, I realized, lies not in resisting change, but in embracing it, in allowing oneself to be shaped by the forces of life, just as the mountains are shaped by the wind and the rain, by the relentless march of time. It was a profound realization, a truth whispered by the wind, echoed by the mountains, a lesson learned not from books or scholars, but from the very heart of the land itself. The mountains, in their silent wisdom, had spoken, and I had finally heard their echo, the voices of the past whispering the secrets of endurance, the wisdom of change. The biting wind whipped across the high pastures, stinging my cheeks and tugging at the rough-spun cloak I'd borrowed from the shepherd. My hands, raw and blistered, gripped the staff, my only real companion besides the bleeding flock that spread across the hillside like a moving carpet of wool. The sun, a pale disk in the vast expanse of the sky, offered little warmth. It had been weeks since I'd fled the city, weeks since the world I knew had crumbled into dust. Now, high in the mountains, I was just another nameless shepherd, tending to another man's flock, trying to find a rhythm in this new, stark existence. The shepherd, a man named Darius, was a study in quiet strength. His face, etched with the lines of sun and wind, held an ageless quality, as if he'd been carved from the very mountains themselves. His eyes, the color of dark honey, missed nothing. He moved with the easy grace of someone who had spent his life among these peaks. His steps sure and silent, his gaze constantly scanning the horizon, watching for signs of danger. Wolves, straying sheep, or perhaps something else entirely. At night, curled up beside the crackling fire in our small stone shelter, with the mournful howl of the shepherd's dogs echoing through the valleys, he spoke of the land, of the way the snowmelt fed the streams, how the hawks nested in the crags, how the stars wheeled across the night sky, marking the slow, relentless march of time. The work was hard, unforgiving. My days were filled with the constant movement of the flock, guiding them to fresh pastures, ensuring they had water, protecting them from predators. My nights were spent huddled in the shelter, listening to the wind whisper secrets through the cracks in the stones. Slowly, painfully, I began to adapt. I learned to read the signs of the approaching weather in the changing clouds and the shifting winds. I learned the calls of the mountain birds, the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. I learned the patience of the sheep, their quiet acceptance of the rhythm of the mountains. One evening, as the sun dipped below the jagged peaks, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, Darius sat beside me, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. He'd been unusually quiet all day, a pensive look clouding his normally sharp eyes. The dogs, usually restless and alert, lay curled at our feet, their heads resting on their paws. A strange stillness had settled over the mountains, a hushed expectancy that hung in the air like smoke. "There are whispers," Darius said, his voice low, barely audible above the gentle bleating of the sheep. "Rumors carried on the wind." I waited, knowing better than to interrupt. Darius was a man of few words, and when he spoke, it was worth listening. They say there's a royal fugitive hiding in the valleys to the east, sheltered by loyal tribesmen, protected by the very mountains themselves." He didn't elaborate, didn't offer a name. But as he spoke, I saw a flicker in his eyes, a spark of something that looked remarkably like hope. It was a fragile thing, easily extinguished, but it was there nonetheless. I thought of Yazdegerd, the last of the Sasanian kings, his crown lost, his kingdom shattered. I imagined him, stripped of his finery, his power gone, a hunted man fleeing for his life. Could he be the fugitive Darius spoke of? Could he have found refuge in these remote valleys, sheltered by the loyalty of his people? The thought, improbable as it seemed, sent a shiver down my spine. The idea that somewhere, hidden amongst these peaks, the last embers of the Sasanian dynasty still flickered, kept alive by the hope of a few loyal souls, was both terrifying and exhilarating. Darius continued, his voice soft, almost a murmur. "They say he walks among the people, disguised as a simple shepherd. They say he learns the ways of the mountains, drawing strength from the earth, preparing for a day that may never come." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the flock, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps," he said finally, "true power lies not in armies or gold, but in the quiet strength of the mountains." I watched the sheep graze peacefully beneath the twilight sky, their woolly bodies bathed in the soft, ethereal light. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. In that moment, surrounded by the silence of the mountains, the shepherd's words resonated deep within my soul. I began to understand. True refuge, true strength, lay not in palaces or fortresses, not in armies or gold, but in the quiet embrace of the earth, It lay in the simple rhythm of life and death, in the enduring spirit of a land that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires and would continue to stand long after we were gone. Historians may debate the fate of Yazdegerd, argue over the location of his final resting place, pore over ancient texts, searching for clues to his last days. But I, a simple scribe, tending sheep on a windswept mountainside, felt a different kind of truth settling within me. Perhaps Yazdegerd had found more than just refuge in the mountains. Perhaps he had found a kind of peace, a kind of understanding that had eluded him in the gilded cages of his former life. Perhaps, in the silence of the mountains, stripped of his earthly power, he had finally found his true self. The shepherd's directions, etched in my memory, led me on a path that tested both my resolve and my endurance. Each upward step was a battle against gravity, the terrain a cruel mistress demanding respect. Loose scree skittered beneath my boots, threatening to send me tumbling into the abyss. Jagged rocks, sharp as knives, reached out from the mountainside, eager to draw blood. The wind, a howling dervish, whipped around me, chilling me to the bone. Yet I pressed on, driven by the shepherd's words and the hope they carried. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached it. A narrow pass, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through, hidden beneath a torrent of water that cascaded like a silver curtain across the rock face. The roar of the falling water was deafening, and the spray, cold and invigorating, stung my face. I remembered the shepherd's words about the sanctity of waterfalls, how they were seen as portals to the divine, as places where the veil between worlds thinned. Taking a deep breath, I stepped through the curtain of water. The world on the other side was a stark contrast to the harsh landscape I had just traversed. A hidden valley, green and lush, unfolded before me like a secret paradise nestled amongst the unforgiving peaks. A crystal-clear stream meandered through the valley floor, its banks fringed with vibrant wildflowers. Trees, heavy with fruit, offered shade and sustenance. The air, sweet with the scent of blossoms and damp earth, filled my lungs. It was a place of refuge, a sanctuary hidden from the ravages of the outside world. I understood instantly why such oases were so fiercely protected, so highly valued for the resources and security they offered. In the center of the valley, I saw a small encampment. Tents, worn but serviceable, were clustered together, a thin wisp of smoke curling upwards from a central fire. I approached cautiously, my hand resting on the hilt of my sword, my senses alert. As I drew closer, I could make out the figures moving within the encampment. Soldiers, their armor worn and scarred, their weapons bearing the marks of countless battles, stood guard. Their faces, etched with weariness and hardship, held a fierce, unwavering loyalty, a testament to the bond that held them together. Women and children, their faces pale but resolute, went about their daily tasks, their movements imbued with a quiet dignity. And then, in the center of the encampment, I saw him, Yazdegerd, the last king of the Sasanian Empire. He sat cross-legged on a woven mat, his crown gone, his royal robes replaced by simple garments of wool and linen. His face, weathered by the sun and wind, bore the marks of his trials. His beard, once meticulously groomed, was now long and untamed. His eyes, however, held not the fire of a king accustomed to command, but the quiet strength of a man who had faced immense loss and found refuge. He seemed smaller, somehow, stripped of the trappings of his former power. Yet there was a presence about him, an aura of resilience, that resonated through the valley. Historians still debate the extent of Yazdegerd's power during these final years, arguing over the size of his remaining forces, the influence he still wielded. Some paint him as a fugitive king, clinging to the remnants of a shattered empire. Others see him as a symbol of resistance, a rallying point for those who refuse to bow to the conquerors. Standing before him now, a king uncrowned, stripped bare of his royal authority, I began to understand that true power lies not in titles or armies, not in vast riches or sprawling palaces. True power resides in the enduring strength of the human spirit, in the unwavering resolve to face adversity with courage and dignity. It was a power that Yazdegerd and his exile possessed in abundance. He looked up, his gaze meeting mine. In his eyes I saw not bitterness or despair, but a profound sadness, a quiet acceptance of his fate. And in that moment I understood that I was not standing before a fallen king, but before a man who had found a different kind of kingdom within himself. A kingdom of resilience, of unwavering spirit, of quiet strength. A kingdom that no conqueror could ever take away. Years passed. The rhythm of the valley became my own. The turning of seasons, the whisper of the wind through the cypress trees, the gentle clinking of the shepherd's bells. These were the sounds of my new life. I found a different kind of purpose here. A purpose that didn't involve the clash of steel or the whispers of court intrigue. I found a belonging, not in grand palaces and crowded throne rooms, but in the quiet embrace of the mountains, in the shared smiles of the villagers who had taken me in, a stranger, and made me one of their own. We worked the land, shared meals, told stories under the vast, star-studded sky. Life was simple, yet profoundly fulfilling. The news, when it finally reached us, filtered through the valley like a chilling wind. It wasn't unexpected. Whispers had been carried on the breeze for months. Rumors of Yazdegerd's dwindling band of loyalists, of his desperate flight eastward, pursued by the relentless tide of the Arab conquest. Finally, the grim truth arrived, carried by a weary traveler who had heard it from a merchant in a distant town. Yazdegerd, betrayed by a local miller for a handful of silver coins, the price of an empire reduced to the paltry sum of a trader's greed, had been killed near a remote riverbank. The details remained murky, shrouded in the fog of rumor and speculation. Even now, people argue about the exact location, pointing to different stretches of water, different forgotten villages, as the site of the last Sasanian king's demise. The news settled upon the valley like a shroud. The shepherd, a kind old man with eyes as blue as the mountain lakes, wept openly, his tears mingling with the dust of the parched earth. The gardener, her hands usually so busy amongst the herbs and flowers, simply sat by the well, her gaze lost in the distance, a deep sigh escaping her lips every now and then. The weaver's fingers, nimble and swift just moments before, fell still on the loom, the half-finished tapestry, a poignant symbol of an interrupted life, a broken thread in the grand tapestry of history. Even the raven, a constant presence perched on the monastery wall, seemed to croak a little more sadly than usual, its black feathers ruffled, as if in mourning. I felt a pang of sorrow, a deep ache for the empire that was no more, for the king I had served, for the life I had once known. Yet, there was also a strange sense of peace, a quiet acceptance of the inevitable. Yazdegerd's death, tragic as it was just the final punctuation mark at the end of a long, complex sentence. The Sasanian Empire, weakened by decades of internal strife and external pressure, had been crumbling for years. Its fall, though heartbreaking, was perhaps, in a way, a release. I climbed to a high peak overlooking the valley, drawn by an inexplicable need to be alone, to witness the closing of this chapter of history from a vantage point that seemed closer to the heavens. The sun was setting, painting the sky in breathtaking hues of orange, purple, and a deep blood red. The colors, I couldn't help but think, of a dying empire. I remembered hearing scholars discuss how the Persians saw sunsets not as endings, but as transitions, as moments of profound change and renewal. They believed the sun's journey beneath the horizon wasn't an act of disappearance, but a preparation for its glorious rebirth in the east. The wind whipped around me, cold and sharp against my skin, a reminder of the harsh realities of the world. I looked down at the valley bathed in the fading light, at the small cluster of houses huddled together like children seeking warmth and comfort. These were my people now. This was my home. I knelt down and traced a final pattern in the dust, a pattern that had haunted my dreams for years. A falcon, wings outstretched, flying towards the setting sun, its silhouette merging with the last rays of light, its journey complete. The falcon, the symbol of Kavarina, the divine glory that had once shone so brightly upon the Sasanian crown, now seemed to be returning to its source, disappearing into the fiery embrace of the sky. Perhaps, I thought, the Kavarina wasn't truly gone, but simply transformed, waiting to bestow its blessings upon a new era, a new beginning. As the last sliver of the sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the world into twilight, a strange sense of calm settled over me. Historians I knew would spend centuries debating the legacy of the Sasanian Empire, poring over ancient texts, arguing about the causes of its rise and fall, analyzing the impact of its rulers, its wars, its art and culture. They would dissect its triumphs and failures, its strengths and weaknesses, its glories and its shames. They would offer countless interpretations, countless perspectives, each one adding a piece to the complex puzzle of the past. But I, standing on a mountaintop beneath a twilight sky, a silent witness to the end of an era, understood one thing for sure. Every ending is also a beginning. The sun may have set on the Sasanian Empire, but the dawn, I knew, would inevitably break, bringing with it a new day, a new world, a new story waiting to be written. And in that story, perhaps, the echoes of the past would resonate, reminding us that even in the face of loss and change, the spirit of hope, like the eternal cycle of the sun, never truly fades away. The wind whispers through the mountain passes, a soft, mournful song for a king uncrowned, an empire lost, an age transformed. But within that whisper, there's another sound. The gentle rustling of new leaves, the quiet murmur of a hidden spring, the distant echo of a blacksmith's hammer shaping a new kind of world. Persia, like the phoenix rising from the ashes, a slightly less fiery phoenix perhaps, more of a smoldering ember, will endure, its roots deep in the earth, its spirit unbroken. The stars, once chaotic, begin to settle into new patterns, new whispers of resilience, of adaptation, of the slow, patient unfolding of life from the seeds of loss. The night deepens, the shadows lengthen, the valley below falls silent. You close your eyes, the cool mountain air a balm against your skin, the silence a lullaby for your weary soul. Remember the scent of jasmine in the hanging gardens, the heavy fragrance clinging to the silken robes of the queen, mingling with the scent of dates and wine, the laughter of courtiers echoing through the manicured lawns. Recall the intricate latticework, the cascading waterfalls, a testament to human ingenuity, a paradise suspended between earth and sky. Remember the hushed whispers of lovers hidden amongst the blooms, their secrets safe within the fragrant embrace of the jasmine. Hold that memory, sweet and poignant, a fragment of a world now gone. Remember the Shah's troubled dreams, the visions of crumbling walls and darkened skies, the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights etched on his face, the endless consultations with astrologers and priests, the desperate search for meaning in the shifting sands of prophecy. Remember the fear in his eyes, the tremor in his voice as he confided in you, the burden of an empire resting heavy on his shoulders. Recall his desperate attempts to appease the gods, the lavish sacrifices, the endless prayers whispered into the desert night. See him now, a solitary figure silhouetted against the dying embers of his reign, a king grappling with the inevitable tide of change. Let his burden go. It is no longer yours to carry. Remember the astrologer's dilemma? The conflict etched on his face as he struggled to reconcile the celestial movements with the whispers of the street, the weight of prophecy against the unpredictable nature of human will. Recall the scrolls spread out before him, covered in cryptic symbols and complex calculations, the flickering lamplight casting dancing shadows on the walls of his chamber. Remember the tremor in his hand as he pointed to the ominous alignment of the stars, the whispered warnings of impending doom. Recall, too, the flicker of hope in his eyes, the belief that even in the face of destiny, there is always a sliver of choice, a chance to alter the course of events. Let his dilemma fade into the tapestry of the past. The future is unwritten, the stars hold no absolute power. Remember the shepherd's hope? The simple, unwavering faith that sustained him through hardship and uncertainty. Recall his weathered hands, calloused from years of tending his flock, his eyes reflecting the vastness of the desert sky. Remember his stories of ancient heroes and mythical beasts, tales whispered around crackling campfires under the watchful gaze of the stars. Recall his quiet strength, his unwavering belief in the cyclical nature of life, the assurance that even after the harshest winter, spring will inevitably return. Hold on to that hope. Let it be a beacon in the darkness, a reminder that even in the face of loss, life endures. Remember the weaver's threads? The vibrant colors, the intricate patterns, the stories woven into every knot and loop. Recall the rhythmic click of the loom, a steady pulse against the backdrop of daily life, a testament to the enduring power of human creativity. Remember the weaver's hands, nimble and strong, transforming simple threads into works of art, each creation a reflection of the weaver's hopes, dreams, and fears. See the tapestry of life unfolding before you, each thread representing a moment, a person, a story interwoven with countless others to create the rich and complex fabric of existence. Your thread is woven into this tapestry too. Your story is a part of the larger narrative, a vital thread in the grand design. Let them go. Let the weight of the past ease from your shoulders, like the last rays of sunset fading over the peaks, painting the sky in hues of orange, purple, and gold. Watch as the colors slowly deepen, transforming into the deep indigo of twilight, then the velvety black of night, studded with a million shimmering stars. Feel the gentle caress of the evening breeze, a soft whisper against your skin, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Breathe in. Breathe out. Let sleep claim you gently, like the soft, warm embrace of the earth. Feel the tension melt away from your muscles, the worries dissipate from your mind. Let the stillness of the night envelop you, a comforting blanket against the chill mountain air. The stars are watching, silent witnesses to the ebb and flow of time, the rise and fall of empires, the enduring spirit of humanity. Their light, though distant, reaches you, a gentle reminder that you are connected to something larger than yourself, a part of the vast and mysterious cosmos. The mountains are listening, ancient guardians of the land. They have witnessed countless generations come and go, their silent presence a testament to the enduring power of nature. Their strength and stability offer a sense of solace, a reminder that even amidst chaos, there is a constant, unwavering presence. And you, my friend, are safe. Held within the embrace of the mountains, watched over by the stars, you are safe to rest, to release the burdens of the day, to surrender to the healing power of sleep. Sleep now. Sleep.